Okay, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? Or drop something in the chat. Hello, hello. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you guys hear okay? Testing, hello? Oh, thanks, Marie.
There's no sound there, Mark.
Okay, and what I said back there was so brilliant. Let's see if I can do it again. So, okay, we're talking about Agile principle number 8 today, sustainable development. And I think this is an agile principle that we really feel the pain if we're not doing it well. But sometimes it's not the principle that we're most focused on being proactive about. So hopefully it'll be interesting. And we're premiering a new agile cartoon. You'll be the first people I think to see it here. So that'll be great. Coming up in the coming weeks, next week we've got Alex Bird's going to be talking about how do you become an expert. You should have the invites for this, should be on your calendar. If not, let me know, make sure you get that. He's breaking this up. The first half is going to be just kind of talking about how to develop your skills while you're on the clock, working stuff. And then he's actually going to do some coding examples that kind of makes it more concrete for developers. But even if you're not a developer, he said the first half is going to be very, very relevant to anyone that's wanting to just improve the way that they improve their skills at work. So looking forward to that talk. I think I'm looking forward to what I'm going to learn from it. And then after that, so let's see, Alex was next week. This is the next week. We're going to be talking about splitting stories. And this has got to be one of my favorite AI generated images when I ask it to give me an example of splitting stories. Got this out there, lots of storybooks, and he's just splitting away at them. So we're going to be talking about how to take stories and break them down into things that are independently valuable, that we can give to the customer, that makes their lives better, but are small enough we can deliver rapidly. If you've ever worked on a team where it seems like we can't do anything without doing everything, or it takes weeks and weeks to actually get to the point that we can actually get something in the customer's hands, we're going to be looking at some techniques for getting those things down to smaller things to where we can start showing value to the customer earlier on, getting feedback, and just become a lot more efficient in how we do our work. And we've got some interesting diagrams here that I know when I was putting this talk together, just thinking about how we split stories up was very eye-opening to me because I hadn't ever sat down and actually drawn it out. So anyway, this is going to be fun. Looking forward to that. If you've got people on your team that are that this seems relevant to, please forward the invite to them. We'd love to have them be part of it. And for a lot of people, for a lot of teams, coming to something like this and then going away and discussing it, even if you disagree with every single thing I say, it may spark conversations that are going to be very, very useful. And I don't think you'll disagree with everything I have to say. But the point being that the conversations that come out of this, if you get your team to come to it, could be very, very valuable to you. So really encourage you to come to that. And then I think it's the next week, Mike Clement is going to be talking to us about focusing on flow. And let's see, I think that's the ones I've got scheduled out. I just talked to Ryan Latta last week. I don't really know if you remember him. It's been a few years since he's been here, but he's on board to come do another talk. He was the one that had the thing where he's talking about being a Scrum Master, and if people are too focused on telling him their reports, he just turn his back to them or just walk out of the room during the daily stand-up just to get people thinking about the fact this is, anyway, a very unique perspective. I love hearing him talk, so I'm very excited to have him. He'll be here on the 8th, and we're nailing down a topic for that. Okay, so back to Agile principle number 8. So this is screenshot. This will make sense in just a minute. But Agile principle number 8 says that Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. So here's a Slido. I'd like to hear what people have to think about this. How well does your organization support sustainable development? So when you hear the Agile principle talking about sustainable development, on this poll of the stars, where do you think you fall? And if anybody's having trouble with the Slido, there should be, you can go to slido.com and just type in that number or use the QR code. Every once in a while, people are coming from computers that try to lock this down, but you can do it from your cell phone. Your results will show up here as well. So how well does your organization support sustainable development? This is not going to be used for anything other than just how do you feel about it on the number of stars. So let's see where people are at. Looks like we've got, okay, well, kind of in the middle, but someplace we're working where we really feel this is being practiced. Looks like 13% of us are in a place where maybe that's not as important to the organization. And one of the things I want to kind of talk about here is I think sometimes the idea of sustainable development comes down to the idea, well, let's just not work people too hard. We can't ask for them to do more than 40 hours a week or 38 hours a week in some situations, or whatever that looks like for you. And what I want to suggest is the principles and processes behind this will not only make people's lives better, but also let you get more done. It lets you be more efficient. And I think that's the piece that the reason that this doesn't get looked at sometimes is because it's like, oh, well, just don't ask too much of people. Well, I would say that this principle is less about not asking too much of people and more about how do we do our work in a way that's efficient so we're not needing to ask people to do more than what's reasonable for them to do. We're not needing to ask people to work beyond, there's kind of that curve where you work harder and harder and harder, and if you never take a break, your work actually gets worse. So we're looking for ways to make our work to where we can get where it's sustainable, so people are working at their optimal ability rather than trying to push them beyond that and possibly getting much, much worse results and making people miserable. Okay, so next question. What's the biggest impediment to sustainable development overall in the industry? So when you think of software, what do you think of as being an impediment to approaching things as sustainable development? I think this is just free text. So type in a few words that you see as being the biggest impediment to sustainable development overall in the industry. So maybe not just where you work, but where you work is fine as well. Time to market. So we're in such a hurry to get things to market that we don't have time to actually do things in a sustainable way. Resources not assigned to one product. Okay. Understanding value is not all for the end user. Employee burnout. Overload of deliverables, trying to do too many things. Process culture, poor leadership, delivery demands, mandates and changing priorities. I'm sure that's a big one. Lack of refinement. New high priority requests that seem to rise above current work. So everything is the most urgent thing, and you never know what's actually the most important thing to work on. Familiarity, quality versus mandatory timeframes. What else we got? 7 Ps. Not familiar with the 7 Ps. What are the 7 Ps? Competing priorities, unstable resources. Okay. So there's lots of things that we can point to here as being these are reasons that that it is challenging to do this. And honestly, a lot of the things that I see coming up here on our Splitting Stories talk are going to come up in that. So I think a big piece of this, code is not all tangled to make the work small. I think a lot of what, if you're struggling with any of these things, be sure to come to that talk, because a lot of these things come down to the idea that we can't deliver a small piece of things, or we're seeing things as monolithic. We need to deliver all this stuff all at once, all together, instead of being able to break it down into smaller pieces so we can deliver the most important parts first and then decide if we want to do the less important parts. And that has a huge impact on how sustainable our work is. So that talk's going to really, I think, support some proper prior planning, prevent. Oh, okay. That's not one that I've used before, but okay. Too much whip, scope creep, dodge. We've probably got some people here from government agencies that are experiencing dodge as being an impediment to sustainable development. I could see how that could be happening. Too much task switching. Okay, so these are all things that we probably all experience different aspects of these. Here's a XKCD cartoon that I liked, and what they're doing is showing the frequency of the use of the word sustainable in English text as percentage of all words by year. So we went back and looked at, I think, Google's how frequently this word appears, and what he's showing is that by 2109, at the current rate of increasing our usage of the word sustainable, we'll get to a point where 100% all sentences are just the word sustainable repeated over and over again, based on the way that we're continuing to use the word sustainable more and more. Now, chances are that's not going to happen, but I thought it was a funny look about the idea that the word sustainable is not, our increase in the use of the word sustainable is not on a sustainable path. So we'll see how that works out. So 2036 is not that far off, and we should have the word sustainable on every single page of text if this trend continues. Okay, so let's look at our Agile cartoon. So this is just meant to be a kind of fun cartoon to look at the Agile principle, hopefully in a slightly humorous way, to get us thinking about what it means to be sustainable, and maybe some ways that we build things in a way, or that we do our work in a way that's not sustainable, thinking we're doing the right thing. And we're going to look at an example of a track team. So here we go. Agile principle number 8. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Principle number 8 may not be nearly as exciting as some of the other principles, but that doesn't mean it isn't important. In many ways, this principle provides guidance on how the other principles are to be followed. Imagine that a cross-country team is trying to top their previous performance. In fact, the coach's goal is to have his runners be the best in the world. They set to work creating a clever plan to increase their capacity to run cross-country courses. Since the races take a while, they recognize that they need a way to get faster feedback. That way, they can adjust and make improvements as they work out the best way to run. So they decide to break up their work into smaller increments to experiment more rapidly. They need some name for these smaller incremental runs and land on calling them sprints. Each of these short runs are only 2 weeks long. Each of these sprint runs are for only 100 meters. So the coach has his teams running these sprints of 100 meters. The results of the first few runs are promising. Most of the team is able to do these sprints in 11 to 13 seconds. Everyone is excited about what they're seeing on the stopwatch. They aren't sure, but it seems that every single runner is hitting higher speeds than they ever achieved on their longer races. The coach calls in the math professors and they work out that at 12 seconds, his runners are going more than 18 miles per hour, faster than they had ever done on their previous races. With a bit more time at the chalkboard, they realize that if a student can do 100 meters in 12 seconds, the 5K will only take 10 minutes to run. The coach knows that the world record for the 5K is a bit over 12 minutes. According to his calculations, a good portion of his runners are now capable of setting new world records. The runners simply need to repeat the sprint 50 times in a row to be the fastest runners on the planet. Better yet, as they continue to train on the sprints, some of the runners are getting even better times than they started with. By breaking the runs down into smaller iterative goals, they've had a breakthrough that the coach just knows is going to revolutionize the world of cross-country running. Of course, there's a reason the coach can't expect runners to run a cross-country race at 18 miles per hour. It's silly to pretend that you can run 5K at the same speed you can run 100 meters. But what is common sense in athletics can often be missed in the business world, even when it applies in the same way. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Agile principle number 8 is there to help bring some of that common sense into software development. You can't push a team to its limit in a 2-week sprint and then just repeat over and over again. Agile says you need to focus on working in a sustainable way, and everyone should work at a pace that they can continue indefinitely. Early in my career coaching software teams, I was hired by a software firm for a big project. I was working with the team every day, and they were really hitting their stride with regularly delivering incremental improvements and delighting their customer. After a year or so, there was a concern that the team needed to work faster. One of the executives of the consulting firm, that claimed to have immense Agile experience, suggested that maybe we could get the developers to do more work by creating some type of bonus incentive so they would be willing to write more code on the weekends and in evenings for the next few years. The developers were already working hard. Trying to create incentives to work even more hours was not going to be sustainable for the amount of work remaining. In fact, it was more likely to create a bunch of problems as people started trying to put in more time at the expense of the quality that we had been working so hard to instill in the development process. Fortunately, we were able to point to Agile principle number 8 and show that trying to get people to work even longer days and skipping their weekends wasn't going to actually give the project the agility it needed to be successful. Instead, we were able to shift the focus from trying to get the developers to work longer hours to even stronger, ruthless prioritization of each piece of remaining work. The business was able to defer a number of items in order to focus more time on the things that were absolutely necessary to go live, and this allowed the team to reduce the amount of time until the project go-live date. We were able to replace the unsustainable suggestion of slipping more hours into everyone's work week with the very sustainable strategy of simplifying and sorting the work to make sure we built only the absolutely necessary pieces before moving on to the other important items that didn't block going live. There's nothing wrong with dividing your work into sprints to get faster feedback on how well you are delivering what the customer needs, but your process can't be designed like a 100-meter sprint where you exert an unsustainable effort for a short period. Instead, you need processes that everyone can continue for as long as needed, indefinitely. As Agile principle number 8 says, Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. well, hopefully that was a useful, slightly humorous look at being sustainable. And I think I probably heard it several places, but I remember Rich Hickey at a Strange Loop conference giving a talk about simple made easy, and he talks about how as software development teams have figured out how to go faster, then they just decide, or figured out how runners can go faster. They just tell people, okay, we're going to run a 100-meter sprint, and we'll just keep firing the starting gun every 100 meters, and that will make it to where we're really really fast at doing things because we've outsmarted all these other project management tools. Anyway, it was a humorous look at, and hopefully that's a useful way to think about being sustainable. This will be part of the talk. Will be up. It will be. I'll post it live on YouTube on the Mark Shed side of things too. If you can't find it for some reason, just send me an email and I can send it to you once I go live. I was keeping it because this was the premiere, so like you guys are special to see it for the first time. Okay, so let's look at the principle a little bit more. So agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Now, one thing I think is important about this doesn't say, it says we're going to promote. It doesn't say that every single thing we do will be sustainable to infinity and beyond, right? We're looking at saying we're wanting to, the agile processes should push us toward being sustainable, but that doesn't mean that there's never ever going to be a situation where maybe it makes sense for somebody to work over the weekend, or never ever makes a situation where maybe it makes sense for the team to agree, hey, we should probably stay a little bit later today so we can get this thing out the door. And so we need to see this principle as being, we need to do our work in a way that promotes toward this, but it doesn't mean that there's never anything it doesn't mean that we're never going to be in a situation where we're doing something that we wouldn't want to do every hour of every day of the week for the rest of our lives. We're using Agile to promote things that are sustainable. Another thing that I think is really important to call out here is Agile processes promote sustainable development. And I really like this because it means this isn't happening randomly. We've got processes that are going to help make us sustainable, meaning we're being very careful about how we do our work. We're thinking about how we do our work and creating processes around things that will be sustainable. What processes are used and making sure those things promote sustainable development. And I think this is important because if we get in a situation where we're just like, oh, we're doing Agile, so it will be sustainable. No. We want to use our Agile processes and choose processes that are going to make things sustainable instead of just saying we're not, cutoff time is 5 o'clock. We're going to stop working at 5 o'clock no matter what. No, what we need to do is make sure that the processes we're using to develop work make it to where it's not a big deal for people to leave at 5 o'clock or maybe 4 o'clock or whatever it happens to look like. I've seen some teams working that were trying to follow this principle, and there was a team that was really doing well. Their project manager, scrum master, was in a different time zone. So her 5 o'clock was 4 o'clock everyone else's time. And she had a real tendency, very motivated, great scrum master, she did incredible work, to stick around, past when her kids were getting home from school and things like that because of the time zone difference. And it was interesting to see what the team started doing is really saying, hey, you need to sign off. We got the rest of this, or answer this question, and then we think you should sign off for that. And the team was helping to enforce, isn't probably the word, but encourage and make sure that the project manager, scrum master, knew that she was being supported in the idea that it was time for her to be off work. Now, that didn't mean she'd never stay a little bit late if somebody had a question or something, but it was the team working together to try to say, let's work in a sustainable way. And I thought that was a very healthy way where the team was really looking out for each other to try to help make sure people were properly valuing their time with their family and things like that. And now, occasionally the team would stay and work late on something or something like that, but they were really trying to say, our processes should let you go home when your kids or stop working when your kids get home from school. So question for you, what is a sustainable process? Which of these two is a sustainable process? Automating deployments so it takes only a few minutes, or manually deploying because no one wants to invest in automation? Which of these two do you see as a sustainable process? Okay, so most of us agree, 100% agreement, that automating deployment so it only takes a few minutes, is a process that will make things more sustainable. Um, it's interesting how much agreement we have on this and how often this doesn't end up happening, right? It's very easy to be in situations where we're not actually putting in the processes to be sustainable because we're too busy or whatever it is. And there's lots of things, if you've seen some of my other talks about this, there's lots of ways to do this poorly to where it doesn't work well, like a team that takes a year to automate the deployment and then starts on the software only to discover that the thing they automated isn't what they actually need for the software they're building once they get into it. But this is, it's simple. It makes sense when we're asked the question, but this isn't always how we approach our work. And this is the type of idea of what a process should be, the processes we should be investing in to make our work sustainable. What about this? Which of these processes is most sustainable? So having the business representatives at the daily stand-up every day, scheduling weekly status meetings with the business, scheduling an information session whenever the developers need to ask a question, or co-locating business people with the developers. And this may let you do different, I can't remember if this one lets you select separate or multiple things. So just which one of these strikes you as being the most sustainable? So, and now keep in mind, of any of these things that are good, there are probably 100 ways to do them very, very poorly. But in my experience, I've seen teams that actually had business people co-located with the developers. So they were working in the same room. So even if the business people were working on actually using the software to do the stuff that they did on a daily basis, they were in the same room or the same video virtual team room with the rest of the development team. In most cases, that turned out to be much more sustainable because it allowed the conversations to happen very, very naturally without having to stop and schedule a meeting for some point in the future, which caused a break in the work, but also took a larger chunk of people's time to come to a meeting, try to work out all the context and stuff. Other places I've seen where having the business at the daily stand-up every day was a very, very good way to promote sustainable development. Getting them and saying, okay, instead of trying to schedule a meeting and try to fit it into your calendar, let's find a time where 15 minutes every day you can be part of this. If we have any questions, it'll keep you up to date on what's happening. You can give us any direction that you need to if any priorities have changed, and we'll just take 15 minutes a day instead of trying to schedule longer meetings whenever something gets to the point that it becomes a big enough emergency to try to fix. Now, it's not to say there's never a place where scheduling weekly status meetings with business doesn't work, but that's going to create a lot more bumps to kind of sustainable continual delivery in most situations than something where you've got more constant access with the business. Like I said, there's places where all of these would be very, very appropriate. But what I want to get us doing is thinking about, in our situation, which of these would actually enable the most sustainable way of developing software. And if we're in a situation where whenever we need to talk to the business about something, we have to schedule an informational session meeting and find a time that works on everybody's calendars, which is like 2 weeks out, which means the developers don't know what they're doing for the next 2 weeks because they have the question and need to answer it. Maybe we should look for a way that makes that more just built into our process of doing things instead of an extraordinary event that we have to schedule for. Okay, Agile principle number 8, Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain constant pace indefinitely. What does it mean to be sustainable? Well, I would suggest that the second sentence kind of clarifies. So sustainable means the things we're doing, the way that we're working on a regular basis is something we would be happy doing for the rest of our careers or for a big chunk of the rest of our careers. So when we're saying something sustainable, it means that people can work like this. We're not pulling so much time from the business that they can't actually do any of their work. We're not interrupting the business so much that they can't deliver anything. We're not working in a way where the developers are starting to suffer from sleep deprivation. It's sustainable because the sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Whoops, wrong way. Okay, Agile principles. Agile processes promote sustainable development. So based on the result of Agile processes, development should include the full cycle of delivering to the customer. So this is where I want to call out, if we think that the thing that's sustainable is just writing the code, we will probably make a lot of very poor decisions. So we think of development, though, being the full cycle of delivering stuff to the users and getting value from it. Our view of how we're going to work, what processes we want to promote, and how we're going to work together becomes a lot bigger. It's very easy to get to a place where we focus on the development just being writing the code. And then you end up with situations where, yes, you got the code done, but we can't actually, then it becomes a panic and all hands on deck over the weekend to deploy this stuff. That's not something that's sustainable. So we need to be thinking of how things work throughout the whole cycle. So what should be included as development? Getting requirements, testing, writing the application, deploying the application, fixing any issues, or all of the above. What should be included as development? Yes, and the reason I want to have to physically click on this and say all of the above is if for some reason we make our development include just a few of these items, we're going to be setting ourselves up for things that are extremely unsustainable when we get to the other parts of it. I don't know if you've heard the joke that I was at a conference and somebody was explaining the project they were working on, like, oh, well, we finished the first 80% of our project, and now we're starting on the remaining 80% of the project, because they weren't including all of these things in the way that they were measuring progress. And this is where I think the Agile principles really interlace nicely, is that and also show how you can go astray, is if we're using a good definition of progress and saying that needs to be sustainable, we will probably get a lot of these things right. If we're using a poor definition of progress that just includes certain pieces of things, we'll probably end up getting a lot of these things wrong and be very unsustainable, because we're not really thinking about what we're trying to deliver, and we're just thinking of one small piece of it. Okay, the sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. So I think this is interesting, because it's saying, if we think of the sponsors being either the business or the people that are paying for it or whatever, this has to be done in a way that the people that the developers need access to and feedback from are able to actually sustain doing this. You can't just expect to pull and interrupt all their time. We've got to find a way of working together where this works well. There's a software project I was working on with, it was an agricultural area, some agriculture auction stuff. And we found that the sponsors were already working on a bunch of other things that was not sustainable. So we were having a very, very difficult time actually just getting them to say, hey, we built this, can you give us feedback on it? They were very inaccessible because they weren't working in a sustainable way already. So this is something you need to think about. Isn't just like, how can the development team do things, but do we actually have sponsors that can integrate into our processes in a way that is sustainable? Same thing true for the users. So if the team needs users to provide feedback, if we ask for too much from the users, it's not going to be sustainable. And the other big thing I wanted to call out with this is, we may be asking the users to give us feedback on stuff, but I've seen some places where the development team is changing things so fast that the rate of change is not sustainable for the users. I don't know if you've gone through, and for a while I kind of felt like this with Microsoft Word. Every year it felt like there was a new version, and they'd randomly put things in different places, and it's like I can't keep up with how fast they're moving things around. And also questioning, maybe it does provide some value for me, but it's not sustainable. I'm going to stay on the 2008 version of Microsoft Word because I know where the buttons are to do things. So I think this is an important thing to remember as part of this principle, is how are we going to, don't just think about the developer team. Are we providing things to the users in a way that is sustainable? I was we were doing some development work for a lawyer, and I don't know if we got anybody from Virginia, but from what I understand, in Virginia, if you exceed the speed limit beyond a certain point, it's not just that you get a ticket. It's like you go to prison if you're above a certain amount. So as you can imagine, there is a very big need for lawyers, particularly for people out of town or out of state that didn't realize that they were going too fast. And now they're not just looking at paying a fine, they're looking at going to prison unless they can get a lawyer that can really knows what they're doing. Anyway, this friend of mine does that, and so he has a great process in place for taking people that he knows has fines, sending them information saying, hey, I can help represent you if you want. Here's what the process looks like and stuff. So it's a big CRM system for people, particularly people out of state that need legal representation so they don't go to prison for speeding. And we were working with him to improve this kind of homegrown system he had. And one of the things we were trying to be very, very sensitive to is the users, the people he had in the office that was using these systems. If we changed stuff, even if it was an improvement, it had a big impact on what they could do in the day, right? If we moved some things around or had a different process, even if it was better, if it threw a lot of, oh wow, 15 miles, I didn't realize that was that low. That's interesting. I knew it was a big deal, but I didn't realize it was that low. If we changed up the way they were working too quickly, it caused them a lot of problems, even if it was better. So in trying to follow this principle, we were trying to think, how can we be more work in a way that's sustainable for their users? And what we started doing is, like, within the menu items, they would have, generate letters to people that have gotten speeding tickets. And we were working on improving that process. So instead of just removing the old way of doing it, we created a thing that said, send letters to people who, with speeding tickets, new method or something like that. And they had both options. So they could continue to do things in the old way if they were more comfortable with it, but the new way was there, but it made it sustainable. If they were short on time and they knew they could get things done in the old way, that was fine. We were happy for them to do that. But if they're wanting, as they had time, to use the new way and become familiar with it, they could do that. And that made it sustainable for them. And this is something I think we don't often think about when it comes to sustainable, is how do we introduce change into a system in a way that the users of the system can actually grow with us without it becoming unsustainable to them. And this is where we've got lots of different aspects. And if we get too focused just on the developers side of things, we may not think about the problems we're creating for the users, or get very focused on the users and the developers and forget that the sponsors has lives outside of this project as well. At what point do you decide to remove that technical debt and not carry both methods around forever? Well, that would be a business decision, right? When on these things, once they got to, and it was a small office, so it wasn't necessarily hard to do. Once they had it for a few weeks and said, yes, we like the new method better and we're going to stop using the old one, then we could take it out. If you're working on very large systems, what I would suggest doing is you may want to instrument it so you've got some feedback, and you can say how many people are actually using the old system. And when it starts to go down, that might be a good time to think about turning it off. Or as it starts to go down, you may make it to where when you try to go to it, it gives you a pop-up and say, hey, this isn't going to be around forever. This other way will save you a lot of time. Make sure you look at doing that at some point. So those are some thoughts. Okay, what way have you seen of things being unsustainable for users? We talked about this a little bit, but which of these have you experienced the most? Where they're asked to attend too many meetings, or the application changes, that's the one we were talking about, application changes so fast they can't figure out how to do their jobs, or the developers are constantly interrupting them with questions about how they want the software designed. Okay, so it looks like people have experienced different things of these, and there's not, you may always have some piece of this, but if we're wanting to develop in a sustainable way, we should be very aware of how the way we're working in our processes, how those actually impact the users. I found in a lot of cases, the too many meetings thing, if you're able to either co-locate users with you or get them to attend daily stand-up, you can save them a lot of time because they've got the context and they're available on a regular basis, so they're not needing to be interrupted because you just talked to them 4 hours ago and you'll talk to them first thing in the morning. That creates a way of flowing for information that may not be there if you're trying to schedule meetings and then can't get people. Okay, so also the sponsor, the developers. And this is the one that I usually think of when I think of sustainable development, is the developers. We want to make sure the developers are not being asked to hurry up and wait. So when we're trying to make things sustainable, we want to make sure that there's not, if we have smooth flow, we're going to be able to create sustainable processes for the developers. I'm guessing, give me a thumbs up if you've experienced this, where the developers keep being told, not yet, and then all of a sudden it's a huge emergency and everything needs to be done right now, today, even though they've known about it for several weeks. So that's a that's a common thing we've probably experienced. That's not sustainable, right? You can't have don't work, don't work, don't work, don't work. Okay, now panic mode. That's not sustainable. We need to find ways to let the developers work in a sustainable way. So those are things to watch for, and it can be very difficult sometimes if the culture of the organization is around this to overcome that. But our agile processes should help us promote sustainable development, which means we should be able to come up with ways to move away from that to things that are more sustainable for the developers. Maintain a constant pace indefinitely. So working in a way that's predictable and consistent, no lurching. And so what I just described usually is this a lot of lurching. Constant pace means we need to try to smooth those things out. Mike Clement's going to be talking to us about flow, which is related to exactly how this works. Let's see. Okay, maintain and indefinitely, which means this gets back to our runner analogy. They cannot maintain the 100-meter run, what they can do in 100 meters, over a long period of time. We want our development to be something, the way that we're developing software, that for all of these people involved, we're able to do this on an indefinite basis, just continuing to work in this way where everybody can be happy, and it can be a very sustainable life of people working, having time for their family, having time for their hobbies and everything, but working together in a way that's not just burning people out. If those runners keep running at the 100-meter pace, they will probably eventually slow down. If they don't, they will kill themselves. We want to not kill our development teams. Okay, so that's a look at the Agile principle number 8. We're going to do going to give some stuff away here. I think we'll give away I'll tell you what, we'll give away a sweatshirt if we've got your right size. I've got some other shirts, but the turn your video on shirts, I didn't end up wearing it today because my wife said, that's too dirty to wear. You put on something else. So I'm wearing something else. We're going to do that in just a second, but I want to give you a quick kind of overview of this class we're doing. I did this last year. It was a lot of fun. What we do is this is a paid class through Maven. We're going to, matter of fact, let me paste it here in case you want to take a look at it. What we're doing is we're going through 5 business books. It'll be 5 weeks for an hour a week. And so for people that are very, very busy, there's a lot of these books, if you haven't read them or it's been a while since you've read them, these like, oh, these would be great books to read, but you just don't have time to read them. I know I have way more books than I'm ever going to be able to read in my lifetime. But what we do is we go through and we do about a 10 to 12 minute just summary of the book at the beginning of of our session. And we encourage everyone to really think about what is your key thing that you think you can take away from this book that will help you in your job, identifying one thing. And then we spend the rest of the time talking through what that means so we can see what other people were getting from that summary. Some people may have read the book and may have different aspects that they can bring to it, but we're talking through of trying to identify a key point that will help us be better in the way we do our jobs, particularly when it comes to focusing on the way we deliver with Agile. We're going to go through these 5 books. There'll be a couple bonus books in there. Did this with about 7 people last February, and it was awesome. I learned an incredible amount, got great feedback from things. So anyway, that's coming up in April. Some of you may have gotten, I did like kind of a soft launch last week. Some of you may have gotten that. If this is interesting, feel free to reach out. I'm switching over to the early bird pricing now, and so I'd love to send you a key code for that. If you've got questions, reach out. And I've got a sign up thing at the end if you want the key code, or just send me an email. But if that's interesting, click on that link. You can type your email in there if you want more information about it. I'm going to be sending out some like micro summaries from these to the list coming up, so you may be seeing some things as I put on my marketing hat and promote this. But hopefully it will be all stuff that even if you don't come to the class will be very useful in kind of summaries around this book and some of the key takeaways. Okay, moving on. Let's win some t-shirts or some sweatshirts, hoodie sweatshirts. So join the quiz and we will get started. And just so you know, I know sometimes depending on your connection, you may be right most of the time, but just be slower because of your connection speed. I've thrown some kind of random questions in here. So even if you're not as speedy, but you happen to know things about this particular area, you might have a chance of winning even if your connection doesn't let you do it quite as fast. So we're going to try to mix things up just a little bit. And we'll be giving away one of these sweatshirts. Actually, as you guys join, let me show you what we're giving away. So here we go. It's a nice hoodie. If it's cold where you are like it is today, we value face-to-face communication. Turn your video on. Anyway, these are fun. I'll be giving away one of those. I think we've got everything except for a medium. And if we don't have your size, I've got some t-shirts or something that'll work. So, okay, we got everybody joined. Got 42 people. Anybody else want to join? Count down 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go. I think we got 7 questions here or so. Okay, Agile processes what sustainable development? Do they promote sustainable development? Does it create sustainable development? Does it facilitate sustainable development? Or do Agile processes require sustainable development? Lock your answers in. And okay, looks like most people got it. 71% said promote, and that is correct. Agile processes promote sustainable development. What would be a potential way to work in a sustainable way with business people? Potential way would be schedule meetings whenever the developers have a question, only communicate through Word documents on SharePoint, invite them to the daily stand-up, or schedule 2-hour-long status meetings. Based on what we talked about here, what would be the best way to promote sustainable development? And yes, the thing we talked about was invite them to daily stand-ups. If we're scheduling 2-hour-long status meetings each week, we're taking a big chunk of their time every week, and that may not be sustainable for them over the long run, which doesn't mean there's never going to be a case where we actually need to have a meeting. But if we're looking for ways to get feedback quickly and get rid of lurching, then inviting them to the daily stand-up in a lot of situations may be more sustainable. Okay, in our leaderboard, we've got Ryan in the top spot, followed by Dela, Jeff, Nick, and Steve. Next question. How long should an Agile team be able to maintain a sustainable space? Should they be able to do it until the cows come home, according to the Agile principles, until the cows come home, indefatigably, indefinitely, 2 weeks, or happily ever after? According to Agile principles, they should be able to maintain a sustainable pace indefinitely. And I'm very disappointed that no one said until the cows come home. 2 weeks, the reason that we may not want that one is if we're just able to do something for 2 weeks, it's kind of like running the 100-meter sprint. We might run 100 meters really, really fast, but that might not be something we could do for a 5K race. So we want to make sure that we're not just thinking about how can we squeeze the last drop of blood out, or last bit of life out of people in this 2-week period, and think more of how can we work in this 2-week period in a way that's sustainable for long periods of time, and how can we change our processes so it's efficient to be sustainable. So indefinitely, yes, that is the Agile principle. Leaderboard, we've got Steve in the top spot, Jeff, Dela, Ryan M, and Nick. Next question, which books will not be covered in the upcoming class? Okay, so this one you would have had to remember what was on there, look at the link. Is it Team of Teams, Red Book of West March, Little Bets, or Good to Great? Which one's not going to be covered in the upcoming class? And yes, we are doing Team of Teams, Little Bets, Good to Great, but we're not doing the Red Book of West March. So next question will be, there's our leaderboard. Who wrote the Red Book of West March? Okay, this is a random thing. If you know, you know. If not, don't feel bad. It's kind of an obscure thing. But who wrote the Red Book of West March? Was it Bilbo Baggins, Edward Scissorhands, Harry Potter, Bart Simpson, or Luke Skywalker? And hey, 58%. That's cool. And I really like the 17% of you said Edward Scissorhands. I'm not sure of any book he wrote in part of that movie. But Bilbo Baggins, supposedly the Red Book of West March was this big collection of things written by hobbits, Bilbo Baggins, and it's where the Hobbit stories were, and I think with Lord of the Rings in it too. Anyway, it's if you're reading some of Tolkien's other stuff, he talks about finding this book. I think the there's a set of poems that he has, and it starts out saying, hey, we found this book, and here's what came, and he gives all this history around it. So anyway, 58%, I'm impressed with your Lord of the Rings trivia here for everyone. Hopefully that kind of mixed things up. Next question. Oh, okay, so we got Steve, Jeff, Jake, Benjamin, and Frank. Next question is, why did Mark say the word process is important in principle number, I think that should be 8 instead of 9, sorry about that. Because it's a great buzzword to throw in, because we have to process tickets, it allows managers to control teams better, or it points to the need for intentional way of doing work. And yes, the process, I would say, what I was trying to point out is this point, because it points to the fact that we need to do things intentionally in order to be sustainable. It's not just a matter of we're sustainable because we refuse to work after a certain time. or we've got hard limits on everything. It's because we're actually working in a way, we're using processes that bring sustainability. Okay, Steve. Okay, 6 out. Okay, I think we got one more question here. We got Steve, Jake, Jeff, Rick, and John. I think last question. Who did Mark not say this class was great for? Is it good for busy people who want insights from business books? Agile practitioners who want benefits from a fresh blend of business ideas? Business people looking to introduce Agile principles? Or hobbits? And this may actually have come more from the webpage I posted than actually what I said. But yes, hobbits are the ones that I did not. This may not be the best thing for them. They're going to be too busy having second preference, probably. This book is great for busy people who want insights from top business books but may not be able to read the whole thing, or are interested in not, let's get an overview of the big takeaways from these 5 books, and then let's see which one I'd like to read more deeply. And maybe you'll find one that really resonates and one that's like, well, that was interesting, but I would rather spend my time on something else. Agile practitioners who want to benefit from a fresh blend of business ideas will also find this very, very useful, and business people looking to introduce the Agile principles. So if you're in a case where you're trying to introduce Agile principles, but working with business that maybe hasn't heard of it, this will give you some language, vocabulary, things that are talked about in the business world, and our discussions with your peers are going to help give you ways of maybe introducing those things and how to bring these business principles from these books, align them with Agile in ways that can help move your company forward. Okay, congratulations, Steve. You win the sweatshirt if you don't have one. If you do have a sweatshirt, let me know and we can give you a t-shirt or something similar. So send me an email and we'll get one headed your way. Give me your size. Like I said, I think we've got everything but a medium. Give me your size, address, and we'll get one headed your way. So thank you all for coming. Here's the class that's coming up. Last thing is, if you would like a discount code for the Agile skills with key ideas from these 5 business books, go ahead and click on the, I think the Slido should have popped up. Is that working for you guys? Did it pop up with the Slido? It'll ask for your name and address, and then I can send it to you. That working? Okay. So if you're interested, type it in there. You'll get some other stuff from me later, but if you want the best discount that we have available now, go ahead and do this, because I'll start with here before I start doing other things. And we may end up starting another cohort, because this one, we've got a few people there looking at bringing a lot of people, and it may fill up very, very quickly. So thank you all for coming. I'll stick around in case anybody's got any questions. Next week, remember, we've got Alex Bird coming to talk to us, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm curious what you guys thought of this kind of look at Agile principles. Was it useful? Was it boring? Do I look too washed out as a cartoon character?